At this time, also please mute or turn off your electronic devices. Thank you. For the full list of award winners and for more details.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to join you here today to honor this year's enlisted superior performers. Each year at West, the U.S. Naval Institute and AFCEA International recognize the service, capabilities, and accomplishments of sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen from local area commands. The recipients will receive a one-year gratis membership to the U.S. Naval Institute and AFCEA International. These sea service professionals were selected by their leadership for their outstanding service. They represent the talent across warfare communities, enlisted occupations and specialties that are serving globally and at the tip of the spear. They are professional, educated, aware, capable, and making a difference each and every day. This afternoon, we will recognize service members from 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center, 29 Palms, California, Marine Corps Air Station Yuma, Marine Corps Communication Electronics School, Marine Corps Installation West Base Camp Pendleton, Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego, and Marine Corps Tactical Systems Support Activity. At this point, I'd like to invite the parent command representatives to please join me on stage as I will introduce you to formally recognize your exceptional performers. I ask that when your name is called, each awardee stand and that we hold our applause until all awardees from their respective parent command have been recognized. Thank you. Okay. Sergeant Major Peter Seow will recognize awardees from the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of Lieutenant General George W. Smith, Jr., I have the distinct privilege of being able to recognize and start the acknowledgement of our enlisted superior performers today. I take note that the Marines that I'm about to call their names, they represent the over 50,000 Marines and sailors serving in the nation's largest Marine Air Ground Task Force. They also represent the thousands of Marines that are currently deployed overseas today. Hospital Corpsman First Class Brianna Bartholomew, 1st Medical Battalion. Sergeant Ian Bergman, 9th Communication Battalion. Staff Sergeant Montana Casper, Marine Aviation Logistics Squadron 11. Corporal Joyce Chambliss, Combat Logistics Regiment 17. Sergeant David Collinshell, 1 Marine Expeditionary Force Support Battalion. Sergeant Timothy Duchini, 3rd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion. Staff Sergeant Alex Gifford, 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. Lance Corporal Cassandra Granados Sandoval, 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit. Sergeant Alfredo Guerrero Pedroza, 7th Engineer Support Battalion. Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Casey Hales, Navy Education Training Office, 1st Marine Division. Sergeant Peter Lopez, Marine Wing Headquarters Squadron 3. Corporal Arandi Mendoza, Headquarters Battalion, 1st Marine Division. Hospital Corpsman 3rd Class Zelanika Miranda, 1st Dental Battalion. Corporal Ashley Moreno, Marine Aircraft Group 39. Sergeant Ethan Nottingham, 1st Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. Corporal Owen O'Brien, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment. Corporal Daniel Espina, Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 225. Sergeant Cameron Roberts, 1st Radio Battalion. Staff Sergeant Emily Robinson, Marine Aircraft Group 16. Sergeant Avery Van Erp, Combat Logistics Battalion 5. Ladies and gentlemen, the Marines and sailors of 1st Marine Expeditionary Force.
You guys and gals can go ahead and have a seat. Master Sergeant Kenneth Sapienza will now recognize the awardees for Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center 29 Palms.
I'd like to thank sponsors for recognizing the Marines who worked hard this year. The Enlisted Superior Performance Awards for Marine Air Ground Combat Center are Sergeant Robert Parr and Lance Corporal Leslie Soliscat.
Sergeant Major Walter Rose will recognize awardees from Marine Corps Air Station Yuma.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Marine Corps Air Station Yuma, we would like to recognize our enlisted superior performers. Corporal Jenna Benorden, Corporal Brooklyn Fabinall, Sergeant Abraham Wynn, currently deployed, Sergeant Malin Oxner, and Corporal Cameron Stuman. Thank you.
Sergeant Major Andre Cuthbertson will recognize awardees from Marine Corps Communications Electronics School.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a pleasure to be up here to announce the Marines from Marine Corps Communication Electronics School for superior performance. I'll begin with these Marines. Sergeant Carlivans Carlo, Headquarters Company. Sergeant Benjamin Getterker, Air Control Training Squadron. Sergeant Katie Pewitt, Air Control Training Squadron. Staff Sergeant Ernest Razzo, Communication Training Battalion. And last but not least, Sergeant Brandon Williams, Communication Training Battalion.
Sergeant Major Michael Cedeno will recognize awardees from Marine Corps Installation West, Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Brigadier General Woodworth, Marine Corps Installations West, the following Marines to be recognized. Staff Sergeant Steve Berrigan, Marine Corps Air Station Camp Pendleton. Corporal Fletcher Crockett, Security Emergency Service Battalion, currently deployed. Corporal Marissa Escobedo, Headquarters Support Battalion. Corporal Cheyenne Jupiter, Headquarters and Service Battalion. Sergeant Denise Ponce Gamboa, Headquarters and Support Battalion.
Sergeant Major Carlos Aguilera will recognize awardees from Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, we'd like to recognize these Marines. Corporal Joseph Dixon, Corporal Joshua Drexler, Lance Corporal Jocelyn Keelis, Sergeant Jade Talone. And due to operational commitments, this Marine is at MAI course, Corporal Juan Rosas Vasquez. Thank you very much.
Master Sergeant Stephen Francisco will recognize awardees from Marine Corps Tactical Systems Support Activity.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Marine Corps Tactical Systems Support Activity, I'd like to recognize the following Marines. Sergeant Callie Belmont, Sergeant Dylan England, Corporal Ted Ham, Sergeant Jesus Curie, Sergeant Jasmine Tedke,
Let's have one more round of applause for our awardees today. Thank you.
Congratulations to all of our enlisted superior performers. We would also like to recognize another group of awardees here today. The Copernicus Awards recognize Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard individuals who have demonstrated sustained superior performance in a C4 or IT-related job. We will present awards to the 2023 class during the awards ceremony and reception this afternoon between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. upstairs in Ballroom 20D. Many of the 2023 awardees and also past Copernicus will be recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please join me in welcoming to the stage Vice Admiral Peter Daly, U.S. Navy retired, Chief Executive Officer and Publisher, U.S. Naval Institute.
Good afternoon. Hope everybody's enjoying their lunch. I'm here to thank Appian for its sponsorship of this afternoon's keynote. And before I introduce our keynote speaker, I would like to ask Asan Wardak to come up. He's the Director of U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps Accounts at Appian to say a few words. Please come on up, Asan.
Thank you, Admiral Daly, for that introduction. I wanted to welcome everyone here today to the Luncheon keynote that will be featuring Admiral Paparo here at West 2023. My name is Asan Wardak. As Admiral Daly said, I am the director of our U.S. Navy and Marine Corps accounts here at Appian, and we're a proud sponsor of WEST 2023. We'd like to thank FCA International and the U.S. Naval Institute for hosting this event. And during this conference, we're here to discuss future readiness, capability, and capacity as it relates to future threats. At Appian, we uniquely understand that we must be able to deliver applications and capability in the hands of our Marines and sailors at speed, but with flexibility, especially as we are trying to stay ahead of our pacing threat in the Pacific. And of course, we'll hear more about those remarks during today's Luncheon keynote. Appian is a low-code platform for building mission-critical applications. We do that through intuitive drag-and-drop components that lead to being able to build applications faster rather than through tens of thousands of lines of code. These capabilities include not only workflow, but also robotic process automation, process mining and discovery, artificial intelligence, and other capabilities. Our booth is 1436, and if you have time after lunch or over the next couple of days, please come by our booth to learn more about our capabilities at the IL4, IL5 level and beyond. Thank you so much for your time. Admiral Daly, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Asan, and thank you again to Appian. Now it's my privilege to introduce our keynote luncheon speaker, a 1987 Villanova graduate. Admiral Sam Paparo is a career naval aviator and Top Gun graduate. I think that's apropos to mention this year, especially. Top Gun graduate who's flown over 6,000 hours in F-14s, F-15s, and F-18s. He has 1,100 successful, which is why he's here today, carrier landings. He's commanded at all levels, including Strike Fighter Squadron, VFA 195, and the forward deployed naval forces in Japan, deploying on the Kitty Hawk Strike Group. He commanded VFA 106 in Oceania. He was commander of Carrier Air Wing 7, embarked in the Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, and he was himself commander of Carrier Strike Group 10. Later, he was commander of U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, commander of 5th Fleet, and Combined Maritime Forces in Manama, Bahrain. Joint assignments include exchange duty with the U.S. Air Force, flying in the Air Force 71st Fighter Squadron, flying the F-15C Eagle. He was a commanding officer of a provincial reconstruction team in Nuristan, Afghanistan. Battle director at the Combined Air and Space Operations Center in Al Udeid, Qatar. He was director J3 of the U.S. Central Command in Tampa, Florida. Admiral Paparo took command of the Pacific Fleet in May 2021. And let's give Admiral Paparo a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all. It's a tremendous honor to join you again this year. First, I'd like to thank Admiral Pete Daly and General Susan Lawrence, the organizers and sponsors, for hosting, planning, and supporting this consortium of great minds. I'd also like to take a solemn moment to recognize the passing of Admiral Dick Mackey, who was laid to rest at the Punch Bowl last week here in Hawaii. He was such a pioneer in the critical enterprise that AFCEA cultivates. I think the richness and the most powerful part of our conversation today will be the questions and answers, but I would like to prime the pump just a little bit with what we've been up to over the last year. Last year, I shared with you the Pacific Fleet operational design and the threats that we face here in the Indo-Pacific. This year, I'd like to focus on naval joint combined partner operations as the largest force in our nation's front line against revisionist actors. Pacific Fleet meets this responsibility with strength, resolve, and confidence. Together with our joint and combined partner operations, we're positioned to deny and defend across all domains any attempts to break the peace afforded by the international rules-based order. And so maybe just a few reflections on 2022 over the last year that may prime the pump on some questions. Naval forces maintained persistent presence in the first island chain and affirmed freedom of the seas by conducting relentless Taiwan Strait transits and freedom of navigation operations. We cultivated our important alliances and partnerships and demonstrated unmatched combat power throughout the region. During Valiant Shield 22, we executed innovative warfighting concepts by fusing manned and unmanned capabilities, bringing to bear warfighting advancements that make us an even more lethal fighting force. In Kamandag, PAC Fleet and MAR-4 PAC Fleet Marine Force units worked closely with Philippine Navy and Marine Corps for seamless interoperability in complex expeditionary operations from critical terrain. Rim of the Pacific, the world's premier combined maritime exercise, included an awe-inspiring 25 nations working together to foster the multinational cooperation and trust that's critical to building confident and capable partners. RIMPAC represented another successful milestone for regional solidarity to safeguard a free and open Indo-Pacific and our ability to outthink and outpace our adversaries. Numerous fleet and shore commands achieved tremendous results, enhancing our force posture forward and improving our combat effectiveness. And just a few examples of this include USS Zumwalt, who embarked on extended operations to the Western Pacific for the first time, displaying unique, game-changing combat capabilities. I commend the entire team for thoughtfully managing risk and executing a creative training and certification program that accelerated the employment of this formidable capital ship. During SwarmX, we executed portions of the newly developed Pacific Fleet Ship Wartime Repair and Maintenance ConOps, demonstrating emergency battle damage repair techniques in a simulated combat environment. This will greatly enhance our reach and our wartime resiliency. USS Portland completed a series of solid-state laser tests, unlocking the enormous potential of directed energy weapons systems. Fleet Information Warfare Command Pacific commenced operations don't have to tell this group that we are living in consequential times, a period of intense competition and high stakes. If you are within earshot of my voice right now, you must know that you are indispensable in our ability to deter that conflict and, if necessary, to fight and win it. We seek to deter Russia from continued aggression. We seek to deter the DPRK from threatening its neighbors and the international community with nuclear weapons. We seek a denuclearized Korean peninsula. And our pacing and strategic challenge, we seek to deter any PRC attempt to remake the order to its own proprietary advantage or resolve disagreements or arrangements by force or coercion. We cannot normalize this intentional malign behavior by the PRC and the Chinese Communist Party, which we see in the form of territorial aggression against its neighbors, including consistently failing to adhere to coal regs with unprofessional and unsafe behavior at sea. Just days ago, China Coast Guard, using a military-grade laser, tried to disrupt a Philippine Coast Guard ship from delivering food and supplies to personnel on board Sierra Madre near the Second Thomas Shoal. This report follows last week's China Coast Guard, accompanied by boats belonging to Chinese military militia, attempted to create a blockade around Second Thomas Shoal. A PLAN vessel illuminated an Australian P8 with a military-grade laser about this time last year. The PRC continues to coerce and pressurize the waters and skies surrounding the Senkakus and continues military actions along the line of effective control. And in just the past few months, the PLA has conducted a series of military measures around Taiwan, including several warships encircling Taiwan while many aircraft crossed the center line. And the PLA conducted ballistic missile launches north, south, east, and west of Taiwan simultaneously. What message are they sending that indicates a peaceful unification with Taiwan? What message do these actions send to their neighbors and the international community when these behaviors are in contradiction of nations that respect the rule of law and international norms? Their actions are driving our allies and partners to strengthen their own defenses and to increase interoperability with like-minded partners who share common values and common interests. And we do not ask any friends or neighbors to pick sides. So this is not about containing PRC economic and military growth. It's about ensuring that we, as free and sovereign nations, ensure their actions and behaviors do not disrupt the peace and stability of the region or the international rules-based order that has lifted 60% of the world out of poverty since the Second World War and lifts 160,000 human beings out of poverty each and every single day. So with this, we turn to all of us here in this room and in this conference. We're looking for your assistance to harness America's unparalleled innovative spirit, to unlock your creativity to develop systems that complement, extend, and bolster our current combat advantages. It's our duty to provide a clear set of problem statements up front for industry to bring solutions. This year, this process will address 4 key problems: to defeat adversary amphibious force in a contested environment by fielding cost-effective, lethal, asymmetric capabilities, develop agile, resilient, and secure joint and coalition fires network and architecture, deliver maritime intra-theater logistics, fuel, munitions, food, repair parts, etc., to sustain high-end combat operations across the joint force in highly contested environments, and to develop tactical level electronic warfare and cyber capabilities to reduce the risk to our current forces. To move this forward this year, we'll conduct a cycle of studies exercises, experiments, and war games underpinned by intellectually honest assessments. We will get real with ourselves. We will show our bad news, and we will action it. We're increasing trilateral and multilateral operations and exercises with partners in Japan, Republic of Korea, and Australia, to name just a few. We're building upon the lessons and subsequent tactical development from Integrated Battle Problem 21 TAC 1, Integrated Battle Problem 23 TAC 2, TAC 23 TAC 1, forgive me, will be here in San Diego in May of this year. Integrated Battle Problem 23 TAC 2 will consist of a series of experiments connected to our upcoming manned and unmanned deployment to the 7th Fleet. Integrated Battle Problem 23 TAC 3 will carry these initiatives to Australia as a part of our AUKUS alliance. Next year, Integrated Battle Problem 23 TAC 4 will take place in the early spring and will conclude with RIMPAC and Valiant Shield 24. With that, I'd like to open up the floor to any question on any topic that anyone would care to ask. My deepest thanks. I'm ready to go.
Just want to tell people that we've got the mic at the center of the floor, and I'll ask a quick icebreaker question while people queue up. Admiral Paparo, Pete Daly here. You know, you mentioned allies and partners and the importance of the exercise series that you're undertaking. You also mentioned PRC as a pacing threat. That was a key feature of the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy. Another new thing in there that's pretty new still is integrated deterrence. And can you comment on, are there examples, is this starting to work for you? The coordination across department lines, we talked about allies and partners, but how about within the executive branch, the departments working together to bring all elements of national power to support you?
Thank you, Pete. And so I think that integrated deterrence is that properly ordered synchronization of the instruments of national power, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic, that ensures that those instruments are synchronized so that they're not in any way asynchronous, that they would either A, be too weak on their own or present a weakness in one area or the other, or B, are asynchronous to the point that they become escalatory in and of itself. And it reflects a National Security Council process that ensures that all of the oars are rowing equally in order to achieve our national objectives. And I think that that the nation's operations in Russia, with Russia, are an example of that. Is the advise and assist assistance to Ukraine, as well as the sanctions and the diplomatic actions that the nation has taken. This is one example of the execution of that. And we've seen here in recent days with the balloon example, the sanctioning of multiple PRC officials that were within that enterprise in conjunction with actioning the balloons that were violating our nation's sovereignty, are examples of integrated deterrence every single day. And in fact, here within the theater itself, a U.S. Pacific Fleet, as the designated JTF for the Taiwan problem, is the supported commander for day-to-day deterrence with the military instrument with the PRC, and it's the job of the headquarters to synchronize the operations, the activities, and the investments that are going on throughout the theater, present an aggregated risk assessment to my boss, Admiral Chris Aquilino, up at Camp Smith, who then forwards that to the department, and the department in turn brings that to bear in with the National Security Council to ensure that the military's actions do not run afoul those intentions of the executive branch. From my seat right now, it is a well-ordered, working process. Deterrence is a difficult, deterrence, which is not an activity, but is a thing that is produced. That is that your counterpart is dissuaded from executing an undesirable action. Is difficult to measure, but I'll say that from my standpoint, it's working in terms of the properly ordering of those instruments of national power. And pending any follow-ups, Pete.
All right. Good afternoon, Admiral. Paul Rosbolt from Systems Planning and Analysis. I'm going to ask you a question that I also previewed with a panel earlier today. One of the challenges in our new threat environment, as you've already mentioned, is logistics, as the Russians found to their disadvantage trying to get to Kyiv. You mentioned you're trying to study the problem. Do you have any advanced thoughts on what your challenges are in afloat logistics? And in particular, not just keeping Navy resupplied, but in your Commander Task Force hat, I think you have to worry about keeping Air Force and Army resupplied as well.
Amen. Thank you, Paul, for that question. For the last 2 decades, because we were inherently operating in uncontested environments logistically, our logistics enterprises operated on business principles. And those business principles were to resupply the force at maximum efficiency, so that the American taxpayer's dollar could be applied to combat power at the greatest point of need. And in what we're seeing in our operational plans for high-end combat, we've got to think less in terms of maximum efficiency and more in terms of maximum effectiveness. And that is the distribution of 9 classes of supply and distribution of medical, religious, and other types of support throughout the sustainment enterprise such that doesn't take into account just-in-time efficiency, but on-hand availability in the case of combat loss. Because with these operational plans, the country is facing the prospect of combat loss, and we must be clear-eyed about that and distribute ahead of time over the tyranny of time and distance those classes of supply that will have it at the point of need. Similarly, we have to understand that the commoditization, which is a fancy word for the widespreading of precision strike capability of anti-axis air denial, we no longer have the sanctuary of time and distance from adversary weapons. The commoditization in space and in ISR systems means that we've got to think about distributing those 9 classes of supply, the provision of medical and personnel support in potentially contested environments, so that in the ways that J4s, N4s plan logistics, we need N4s, N3s, and commanders executing logistics with the ability to see and understand the battle space, to understand how and where the adversary can hurt you, to find those blank spots in our enemy's situational awareness, to be assessing the risk of our ability to resupply, to rearm, to repair, to revive in that environment under pressure, and to do so in a way that is going to be able to sustain a force that will comprise the entire ready force of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines and Coast Guard and Space Force for that matter. So this is how we are thinking about this, is in terms of planning with the viewpoint of effectiveness, from the viewpoint of pre-conflict distribution of capabilities, of counter C5 ISR to understand the places where we can resupply, in building out commands that are going to be able to command the battle space and command the effort to resupply, the task force to resupply under pressure, and to be setting those conditions and to be rehearsing that every single day, to fly it as we build it every day, and to always be improving our fighting position. Paul, thank you for that question.
Thank you, sir.
Aloha, Admiral Brent Sadler from the Heritage Foundation. You mentioned something that really kind of sparked my curiosity in what you're seeing on battle damage. Can you kind of expand a little bit more about what capabilities and at what capacity, and maybe give a little insight about where you would want to posture that in a wartime scenario so you can maximize survivability of the fleet in a high-end fight?
So thank you, Brett. And Brent, great to see you. You know, where you'd want to posture it, you'd want a wide-ranging, distributed flyaway teams of damage control and engineering specialists, including NAVC engineers, including the rates they can exercise repairs, welding and so forth, and those flyaway teams. This is an overall part of sustainment that just goes beyond just, for most people, you say sustainment, and they think logistics, which is why it's such pains to kind of lay out the 5R taxonomy of the things that we do in sustainment. It's more than just 9 classes of supply. It's also repair activities. It's also rearm activities. It's also revive for medical capabilities. This would be distributed in an arc of contested sustainment that is not precisely at the zone of fire, but nor is it back way in the rear where you would normally expect to be able to execute those activities in a sanctuary, because as discussed earlier, with the commoditization of precision strike technology and missile technology, there's not going to be a lot of areas in the Western Pacific that the adversary can't touch. So that's kind of an idea of how to think that is flyaway teams, double-digit personnel, including equipment that can be transported to the point of need to execute those repairs quickly and to get units back into the fight. And with that kind of long-range view, we have experimented during RIMPAC and during Valiant Shield some of those capabilities. We're working with NAVC in order to build out those teams right now, but that's an idea of how that battle damage repair capability is brought to bear. And it brings to mind an old saying from flight school. I had the great honor of being trained by the Vietnam generation, and I remember after a particularly taxing defensive BFM fight, my instructor took me into a room and said, just because he's behind you doesn't mean he shot you. Just because he shot you doesn't mean he's hit you. Just because he's hit you doesn't mean he's killed you. And it's this notion of never giving up the ship, never giving up on a ship, never giving up on our ability to revive a troop, never giving up on our ability to repair a ship and getting a ship back into the fight. It was that spirit that Pearl Harbor Shipyard brought to bear in May of 1942 when Yorktown was brought into the shipyard, requiring a 90-day repair, receiving a 72-hour repair, and getting into the fight. And it's that resolve and the commitment that's going to help us carry the day. Thank you for that question. And great to see you, Brent.
Kai Alberg from Washington State. Distributed maritime operations seems to imply not putting all our eggs into a few baskets, but having lots of distributed platforms. But when you look at each new generation of ships and aircraft, you see costs increasing exponentially and numbers going down. And even if Congress was willing to write an unlimited check, our shipyard capability is such we are quite limited in many classes of ships how many more we could produce. How do you see making the distributed maritime operations concept work in your area of operations, given these limitations?
Thanks very much. The idea of distributed maritime operations, I'll just kind of start when the Earth cooled, and that's when I first started flying, we used to fly in defensive combat spread. When I was in the Nuristan province, we marched in squads, and divided within that squads, we had fire teams. And a fire team is a 4-person team that is separated from some distance, and they're close enough to be able to carry themselves out of the combat zone, but far enough that a single mortar is not going to take out the whole team. And so the idea of distributed maritime operations is this notion of that we're going to sail at such a distance and in such a formation that we don't present ourselves as an obvious military formation that brings to bear enemy fires, but while still maintaining the ability to provide mutual support to one another. When I first began flying, I had a radar, I had a weapon, and I had the nose of my aircraft. And my sensor was tied to my maneuver, and my weapon was tied to my sensor, and I was in and of myself an organic capability that was combined with others. As we continue through our Project Overmatch to make information and to make targeting information a service instead of tied to individual shooters, this is what enables us to distribute the formations to such a point that an obvious circle of steel, which is obviously a military formation, does not bring fires to bear, controlling our own emissions so that we're not clearly a firing unit, and then employing our weapons smartly from a firing position of defilade to bring overwhelming fires within a zone of fire while representing the smallest vulnerability surface to enemies that could send salvos into individual formations. That's the essence, just in kind of plain language, of what distributed maritime operations are. 10 years ago, our battle force was 273. Today, our battle force is about 298. And so while we're not the 300-ship Navy that we were years ago, I'm not quite ready to sign up to this kind of psychology of quit, of exponential increases in costs and dwindling shipyard capabilities. I'm not ready to quit on that notion of the 355-ship Navy that's in the CNO's NAV plan that we're striving on our way to. But in fact, with that 355 ships and with the 155 or so plus medium-sized unmanned capabilities, we've got to knit these together in such a way that brings those overwhelming fires onto a particular objective while taking advantage of maneuver and taking advantage of expanded battle space, so that we're presenting while maintaining mutual support among units within the Navy's fleet fighting force, and that is the numbered fleet, to bring that fight to bear. It's true that I would not quite say that our shipyard numbers are dwindling. Marinette, Wisconsin is coming up and is going to begin building FFG 62. Bath Iron Works is getting back on track, and DDG 51 Flight 3, and are moving towards the production of 3 DDG 51s per year. I also like to congratulate Austell on opening up a facility in National City that's going to enable us to better maintain ships. But we do, in fact, need to work together to expand the defense industrial base to meet where we are today. 30 years ago, we had the Last Supper in 1992. Deputy Secretary of Defense Bill Perry had a dinner where he said, okay, the wall has fallen and the PRC is liberalizing its economy and its political arms will liberalize as well. And accordingly, we're going to shrink the industrial base because the United States is not going to have to invest as much in this in what's essentially the ability to execute high-end operations. That Last Supper was informed by good information at the time, but things have changed. And we're going to have to increase the efficiency. We're going to have to increase the capability of the defense industrial base. We're going to have to get costs under control. We're going to have to deliver our ships and our aircraft and our weapons, and most importantly, our combat-ready sailors on time. And so I don't necessarily I ascribe to your real thinking, but I don't subscribe necessarily to the pessimism. I've got hope, optimism, and faith in industry assembled there in this room that we're going to be able to tackle that problem. I think that answers on DMO. I think that answers on where we are on the defense industrial base. I'll gladly entertain a follow-up question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I can get up. Sorry, Admiral, a little gear damage. One of the concerns we have that China has access to every port in the world. On the West Coast in particular, we have very limited MCM assets. In the event of an attack on Taiwan and some mining that may be done outside of our U.S. ports, with the amount of international traffic that goes in and out as well, what's your concern about the delay in getting our own assets out of the U.S. ports, getting those operational, and getting there to support you in the fight?
Thank you, sir. I don't see a near or midterm threat of mining of U.S. ports. I don't see the PRC having that capability, and I'm highly confident in the ability of the U.S. Department of Defense to see and sense any effort to mine those ports. I do have concern about potential cyber attacks to U.S. infrastructure and SCADA systems that could exacerbate our ability to deploy the force rapidly in response to operational warning of any act of aggression. And I think that it requires unending vigilance in our cyber systems, in our port systems, and it requires a greater focus on ensuring that more of the fleet is ready to deploy on a moment's notice. And on this, I greatly applaud Roy Kitchener's North Star of 75 ready surface vessels in order to be ready to do this. So I don't see a mining threat. I would see a potential PRC effort to put roadblocks between the deployment of the force through the kinds of asymmetric gray zone activities that could slow us down. We must have unending vigilance through U.S. cybercom and through our own capabilities, the anti-terrorism force protection enterprises within our ports already. And I do think it's an important problem to be focused on. I do believe that we are focused on it, and I welcome any actor within the enterprise that wants to bring up a potential threat vector so that we can action that threat vector. Sir, my thanks.
We have time for one more question.
Sir, Group Captain Kevin Billings, Royal Air Force 601 County of London Squadron. We've been talking at length about the immediate threat and the pacing threat of China, but the long-term threat that the environment and warming temperatures and more humid environment creates for making it harder to fly and fight, and warmer oceans becoming noisier oceans. How is the Navy addressing the strategic threat of a warming climate, and what can we be doing to think more strategically about that, of how we fight differently in a warming climate?
Thank you, Kevin. I think climate change presents itself to navies in two vectors. I think the first and our most important vector is really its effect on our ports, on our airfields, on our ability to operate in environments as you've discussed. And I think understanding sea rise and the hydrodynamics, the ocean engineering of sea rise, and buttressing our ports and our airfields and our overall shore infrastructure is a really important effort towards that. And then the second threat vector is its threat to populations. And with this, particularly through the South Pacific, we saw, though not directly related to climate change, we saw in the last year the earthquake and subsequent tsunami that killed and did so much damage in Tonga, and the exigencies of being ready to respond to those climate emergencies represents, number one, a moral duty from a safety of life at sea and a safety of life responsibility, particularly to those partners with whom we either have treaty alliances or deep partnerships based on historic affinities, such as Tonga. And then number two, the ability to compete with other actors that would exploit that for gaining outsized influence for remaking the order itself. And on that front, I'll just give you a really parochial example, but we've taken Pacific Partnership, which previously had extended from May until September, and we have shifted the window this year of Pacific Partnership to July to December. And then we've aligned that Pacific Partnership from July to December by increasing the formation of the vessels involved in Pacific Partnership and preloading it with a humanitarian assistance and disaster relief package and a C2 package, so that it aligns now with the tropical cyclone season, so that if oceans are warming and temperatures are warming, presumably cyclones will increase in frequency and intensity, so that we are at the point of need faster, to be readier to respond. So on those two threat vectors, first, the critical infrastructure that supports operations and understanding the trajectory of sea level rise and temperature change, we are reinvigorating our look at the Pacific infrastructure, and then what we've done with our operational forces to account for increasing frequency of tropical cyclones and hurricanes are some kind of key areas about how we are thinking about sea level rise and about climate change through this perspective of where's the data leading us, what threat vectors does it present, what actions can we take in advance of it, and how do we close threats and leverage opportunities. Kevin, thank you for that question.
Okay, let's thank Admiral Paparo for an amazing walk around the Pacific. Admiral will send you this. It's a Naval Institute press book, Mastering the Art of Command, with an AFCEA bookmark. We'll send it to you. And on behalf of AFCEA International and Naval Institute, we truly appreciate getting your insight, which provides us important context for what we're discussing here in West 2023. Thank you again, and thank you to our sponsor, Appian. Let's have one more hand for Admiral Paparo. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for attending today's lunch. We now move into a dessert